All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Alchemy Podcast. I'm really excited for today's conversation. This is actually, Dave, so when I started my podcast a year ago, I made a list of who do I want to have on my podcast, and you are on the original list.
Let's go.
So this is a year in the making for me, so I'm really excited and honored to have you. This has been, you're a dream guest of mine for about a year now. The reason being is because I was thinking about it, especially on the drive up here, that there's a couple things I really admire about you. First thing that came to mind was like, from my perspective, if you think about, and I know you're not in door-to-door anymore, but if you think about door-to-door sales and like what that opportunity is and like how people can really leverage it, I don't think anyone has leveraged door-to-door like you have. Like you actually did what it was meant to do of like, go in there, learn hard skills, learn how to sell, then learn how to lead, then learn how to manage people, and then actually take the capital that you make from door-to-door and then leverage it into something way bigger. So if you look at like true success stories of what door-to-door sales is for, I think you're like up there as like truly someone who actually did it and got out as what it was meant to be. And it's really inspiring. You know, when you get into door-to-door, everyone's like, what do you want to do? What's the purpose of all this? You're like, oh, I want to, you know, make a bunch of money and raise capital and then use that to invest. And you've done that better than anyone else in door-to-door history. And so it's something that I really admire you for, is because you've now taken the skills that you've learned in door-to-door and now have leveraged it into something bigger. But I want to kind of start back at the early days when you got into this. I'm curious, when you started, or could you ever imagine that you'd be now like managing an entire like real estate company portfolio, being like one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the state?
No, not at all. I mean, it was just, I was going to college, you know, and I grew up in a small town here in Utah, and it was a very dysfunctional, very low income family. Never talked about business, investments, and that kind of stuff, right? And so for me, and we can go into that if we want to, but it was really hard. And, you know, a lot of people have, you know, hardships that you go through. And for me, it was just, it was really challenging, right? And I'm actually grateful for that though, because it gave me a lot of the kind of the fuel, if you will, the extra motivation, the grit, to be able to go a lot deeper, to be able to go through and do a lot of hard things in my life, including summer sales. You know, I was going to college, Snow College, and Todd Peterson, believe it or not, was down there recruiting in person, and I met Todd, and you know, got a burrito at the local little Mexican restaurant there, and next thing you know, I'm out in Chicago and doing one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life.
What year was that?
That was in 2002.
2002. So you just happened to bump into Todd at Snow.
Yeah. So it's actually at a recruiting booth with Krispy Kreme donuts out, right? I'm a poor college student. I'm like, oh, hey, cool. So we'll go over and start talking to him. And then Todd walks up, met him, and super impressive, very just down to earth, very authentic. And yeah, next thing you know, man, out in Chicago. And I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be challenging, and definitely wasn't something I wanted to do. But, you know, for me, I just knew from an early age I was going to do whatever it took to be able to kind of break out of that situation that I found myself in my childhood. And I had no idea how I was going to do that. I just knew I had this burning desire to do whatever it was going to take, right? And I remember I had a poster in my bedroom as a kid, and it was Jerry Rice, one of my favorite athletes. And, you know, the poster read, "Today I will do what others won't, so that tomorrow I can have what others can't." And that was always just kind of ingrained in me. I'm like, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but when I see the opportunity, I'm going to jump on it. So
were you pretty consciously aware that your upbringing wasn't like potentially an ideal situation and something you wanted to break out of, right? Where you like had this kind of fire in you of like, I'm going to break out of this mold?
Yeah. I mean, my sister ran away when she was 15. I ran away when I was 17. And when I say ran away, I mean, literally out my window, you know, with the backpack on, and didn't have anywhere to go. So I just kind of walked around that night, and I ended up finding a semi truck that was unlocked, and they had like a little cot, you know, behind the front seat. So I posted up there that night, and then I think I slept there the next like 3 or 4 nights.
So you legit were like, I'm out.
Yeah. They ended up finding a little house with like literally like the roof was caving in, man. There's a broken window in the back. There's no heating, air conditioning. I paid $120 a month for rent, and stayed there for 2 years. And
2 years?
Yep.
You lived in a house?
Yeah. My little brother decided to get emancipated and moved in with me. So it was actually just me and my brother, just kind of just trying to survive, man. You know, just, you know, fast food, ramen noodles, just, you know, working graveyard shift, and just trying to get through it. And again, I think that, there's a lot there, man. It was really hard. But all that pain, all that, trauma, all that, just that emotion, I look back at it, I'm actually so grateful for having that life experience because, well, one, it creates the contrast, right? To really enjoy the beautiful life we only create today. But secondly, was the motivation, again, the drive to be able to go out and do some of these things that were really, really challenging and very uncomfortable in the process.
So how did you get into school did you get financial aid or financial help for that or?
Yeah, student loans.
Yeah, so like I'm going to go make something of myself. You go to Snow.
Yep.
Maybe you're a career fair, you see Krispy Kreme donuts.
That's right. Yep, and then eventually I ended up deciding, and the goal was to get my MBA, but eventually, after my first year, I made $31,000, which for me was incredible. Like that was more my parents ever made, and even to this day, that was the most valuable or most meaningful money I've ever made in my life. And it was enough to come back the next year as the top first year sales manager of the company, made $156,000, and that really started this beautiful, 16-year leadership career, managing 121 sales teams across 41 states. But it's interesting that first summer, like 80% of the team quit. And I thought about quitting every day. I mean, probably every hour, honestly, at a certain point in the summertime. And if I would have, quit, kind of tucked my tail between my legs like everybody else was doing, it would have completely changed the trajectory of my life. And so I'm so grateful for not having. And I think, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think part of it was going back to that intense burning desire. I'm gonna do whatever it takes, right, to be able to break out of this and really reset the standard for myself as well as for my future family. And that's really been a kind of a primary goal for me in my life, has been to be the one in my family where I can reset everything, right? Resolve trauma, reset the standard. Reset the standard for happiness, success, legacy, and impact. And understanding that earlier on in my life, I think has been a big advantage for me as I've approached different opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I want to highlight too that when I'm out speaking to sales offices and whatnot, that like the thought of quitting is actually very normal, and it's almost like this thing that we don't talk about, and you don't want to bring up like the shame or that you're weak because you thought about quitting. But every top sales rep I've ever interviewed or top manager, top leader always has this pinnacle moment where like quitting is something that weighs really, really heavy on them. And it's like an actual true decision. And so I think it's actually, I remember, even in 2014 when I was top rep, like I thought about quitting, and then it's actually very common.
Even when you were having success?
Yeah. When I was like, literally I was ranked number one. This was May and June 2014. I was the number one ranked rep at Vivint at that point in the summer. And I remember thinking like, how do I get out of this thing?
Really?
Like,
What's the backstory there?
Yeah, I think it's just like the grind of the job, right? Like the job, I always say this, the job never gets easier. You just get better, right? But every day, like the doors, like it's ruthless. Like it never eases up.
It is one of the hardest jobs, man.
Yeah.
It is one of the hardest ways to make a dollar. I ended up eventually, Todd eventually offered me a regional manager position.
Yeah.
At the time, that was it was pretty much a full-time job. And so the conversation was, hey, if you want to take this opportunity, you need to drop out of college. And at that time I was going to UVU. And I only had three classes left, right? So 9 credits. And it was a tough decision. And so I dropped out. I thought I was going to come back to it.
Well, what into that decision-making process, right? Because obviously you had kind of this dream to break out, go to college, right? That's what we're taught, right? The whole norm is like, if I'm going to save my family and get out of the situation, I'm going to go to college. And then you're like right there at the finish line.
Yeah, for me, I've always been drawn to business, and I love psychology. And I realized that this job, door sales, is where the rubber really meets the road, both in business and psychology. And so I realized I was getting a lot more real world experience and skill sets than I would ever get sitting in a classroom, right? I can read a leadership book, I can read a sales book, and literally go out that same day and go and apply it real time. And, and just the soft skills that we learn doing door sales, the psychology, interpersonal communication, self-mastery, time mastery, the ability to deal with rejection on a daily basis, right? The mental grit that this job requires. I feel like those are skill sets that are going to serve me a lot better than a degree was going to do. And frankly speaking, Doug, it really has, man. Like you look at my the rest of my career there, and then, retiring from that, going full-time into real estate, syndicating capital for, about a dozen different syndications across the country, the Top Golf here in Vineyard that my partners and I brought in, and like Axia Partners, now helping all my kids ages, 10, 13, 16, 19. Last year, we set a goal for them to all start their own businesses as entrepreneurs. And so all 4 of them have launched their businesses. 3 of them are cash flow positive. My son's doing a vending machine business. So we saw some like supply chain issues on that side of it, but he's pretty close. But those skill sets, man, that we learned in that industry are so valuable as a father, as a husband, as a CEO. And luckily, I think I realized that early on. So I knew that as I was making these sacrifices and dealing with this rejection, this failure, which, by the way, I was not a top first-year sales guy. My first month, I sold 6. My first week, I sold 1 account, and it being a sub 600 credit score, so shouldn't have gotten in the first place. I got paid $200, but then they clawed it back because I had to come and take the system out of the home. And then my first month was 6 installs. Middle of the year, I'm sitting at like 25 installs, and I just remember making that definitive decision that I was going to quit. And there's something about making a definitive decision where, it's already determined. You take the emotion out of it, and it is what it is. And once you make that definitive decision, you don't have to spend more energy and more time going back to rethink that because it's already been decided. And in addition to that, the owner came out and talked to the team. He said, "Hey, anybody that sells 100 accounts may have the opportunity to be a sales manager the next year." And to me, that's where the switch really flipped. Like, okay, there's an opportunity here where I can actually go create value at scale. I can become a better leader personally and make this into more of a career.
Yeah, and talk about that a little bit, because one thing that's very clear from my perspective as I look back at my career is like, yeah, the sales skills that we learned are awesome and incredible and a powerful foundation. But I think what's been more impactful in my life is the leadership skills you learn, right? How to like actually, in your words, the psychology and the interpersonal development of like actually communicating with other people and working with other people and inspiring other people. And having done the job at the highest level, the job really transitions from, okay, my job is I'm a sales person, to now in your situation, it's like, oh, I'm in the leadership development game, right? How do I develop and train other leaders? And so who were some of kind of your mentors in that and kind of the leadership skills that you learned in door-to-door that you're now applying in your business now? I mean, before we started recording here, you're talking about all these incredible hires you've made, right? And I'm sure a lot of that skill you learned on leadership, you learned in the door-to-door game. So talk to me a little bit about the people who influence you the most on become a better leader.
Yeah, and I'll preface this. I think there's actually 3 skill sets that are, if you have all 3 of these skill sets, you should be able to create a 7-figure income consistently for yourself, because money follows value, right? And so when you get started in sales, it's all about salesmanship, which is very, very valuable. I used to say that's the most valuable skill set. I would actually argue that leadership is the most valuable skill set. But, it's salesmanship, it's leadership, and then it's the ability to recruit and attract talent. And if you can master all 3 of those skill sets, you're going to be in a very, very good place the rest of your life. I firmly believe that. And so for those listening to this podcast, if you're great, maybe you're first year sales rep and you're kind of figuring out the salesmanship side of it, I would just challenge you to really start focusing on the leadership side of it, and as well as how to recruit, because those are magnifiers, right? Sales is just addition, right? You get a commission for every deal. When you can recruit, then you're magnifying that. And then the leadership side of things, the personal development side of it, frankly speaking, that's been the most fulfillment that I've gotten over a 16, 17-year career in that space. The money's been amazing, but it's the impact and then the ripple effect of seeing, some college student, first year rep that has success, creates some freedom, some financial freedom, and then he comes back and he's a leader, and now he's helping create more and more value for other people. And that's really been a big driver for me in my life, is just how do we create value at scale? Because I feel like at the end of the day, that's what really matters the most, man, right? It's the positive dent you make in the universe and how many people you can help along the way. It's one thing to summit a mountain, but if you can what's even way more fun is if you can bring your friends with you, yeah. Right? And so as for people that have really inspired me and helped me out in my life in that space, I mean, again, Todd, just, one of the most aggressive business guys out there, and I love the drive, and he never slows down, right? I mean, hundreds of meetings in his basement at 2 a.m, just recruiting and until you make it happen. And so I learned a lot from him. Also, I'm passionate about multifamily investing, and I learned a lot from Todd and, how he does apartments, student housing and whatnot. So I was really grateful for that. Sean Brenchley was always a role model of mine. I love that guy. And then also I'd be remiss not to mention when I moved from Vivint Smart Home over to Vivint Solar, it was primarily because of Greg Butterfield, who was the CEO over at Vivint Solar. And the guy's just one of the most, big-hearted, authentic guys, and I was really impressed with them. And so, when I left Vivint Smart Home, I actually left a few $1,000,000 on the table, equity, LTIP, several $100,000s in residuals each year, right? There's just clockwork because I really liked Greg a lot, and so I went over there for 2 years, helped build out the California market. And fast forward to about 3 months ago, I was able to bring Greg Butterfield on as a partner at Axia, and super honored to have him on the team as a general partner. And it's kind of crazy how life plays out sometimes like
But
that.
it unfolds, man. You just can't predict the path, and one thing that I do admire about you, Dave, is that you seem very intentional in every area of your life, not just in business and finance and investing, but also in your health and your relationship as a husband, as a father, right? And so one thing that, you spoke at the Alchemy event not too long ago, you brought up this concept that's called your kind of lifestyle design, right? Where you basically are kind of break down each area of your life. So tell us a little bit more about that lifestyle design, what that looks like, and what the intention is of that.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the word intentionality.
Yeah.
I feel like, I feel like that's my superpower.
Mhm.
It's intentionality.
Yeah, and you can feel it from you. Like you're very it feels like you're very clear in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I think, I learned that two things. I think most people spend more time planning out their annual vacation than they do actually planning out their life, which is pretty wild. And I learned this concept from doing one-on-one performance interviews with my sales reps and my sales managers as I travel around the country. And I realized very quickly when I asked them, "Hey, what's your why? What's your holy cause? What's your purpose?" Everybody has like a knee-jerk reaction, right? I want a new car. I want a sports car. I want to, get an engagement ring, whatever.
I want to go to
But
Hawaii.
but when you go a little bit deeper, it gets very ambiguous very quickly. And I was surprised to see like a lot of guys don't really have that like real clarity on why they're doing such a hard job and they're grinding and sacrificing so much. Like what's the end result you're fighting for? And so I took it upon myself to personally get that clarity and figure it out. So I sat down on a Sunday, remember very vividly, pulled up a spreadsheet and I'm like, okay, so everybody keeps telling me the bigger the how, the easier the why. So let's get really clear here. And I spent about 4 hours on it. And, it's just basically 10 different tabs on a spreadsheet. And, it's my mission statement, which includes my core values, guiding principles, non-negotiables.
Can you give us some examples of those? Like for someone who's like, I've never heard of anything like this.
Yeah. And even better, if anybody wants this, I've shared this with a few thousand people and got a lot of really good feedback on it. So I decided to add it to my website. It's just daveallred.com. And it's actually a free download. So you can download the entire thing. I scrubbed out a lot of my personal stuff out of it, obviously, but
We'll throw that in the show notes. So anyone listening, we can get that to you.
Awesome. So it's a mission statement. It's about a paragraph. And then my 10 guiding principles for my life. And then people always talk about what they're going to do, but I think it's important to also to identify what you're not willing to do, right?
What would be an example of that?
Sure. So some of my non-negotiables are I'll never put money over relationships. I'm never going to trade my time for money. Like I hate the idea of just like an hourly wage. My family comes first, always. And there's a few more on there. It's actually on that template.
Cool. Great.
And then on that same section, I later on added my eulogy, which is actually really
Eulogy.
Yeah. It's a really interesting practice. Like a lot of times people have a hard time really going deep enough to really figure out what makes them tick. Like what at their core, what is their unique God-given potential and what do they want their life to really represent and stand for? And so by writing your eulogy, it's literally a practice of saying, okay, what do I want my friends, family, my neighbors, my kids to say about Dave Allred's impact in this world? And so I wrote the whole eulogy out. It's a really beautiful process. I actually got the idea from Clayton Christensen's book, How Will You Measure Your Life? So that's section 1. Section number 2, then we go into health, which I think is one of the most important things. right? We take for granted our health until we don't have it, and then it is literally the most important thing.
Yeah, so I actually want to pause there on health, because health is something that I think is the foundation. There's that really powerful quote. It's when you're healthy, you have infinite desires. When you're unhealthy, you have just one.
Love that.
Right. And health is wealth. And, you're obviously in great shape. And, for me, when I took my health seriously, like, okay, I'm really going to lock in my diet and my sleep and my exercise and my nutrition, my whole life changed. Right. I was unaware of how good I could feel just by dialing in those things. And, now there's so much going on with the med spas and testosterone and like all these little extra, you know, little tricks. I'm curious from your perspective, what have been some of the biggest needle movers for you in your own personal health?
Yeah. So first off, we could nerd out on this for like a whole podcast on it, right? I'm a closet biohacker.
Yeah.
I don't really talk about it a lot, but about 3 years ago, I really decided to dive into this space a lot more. I lost my mom about 5 years ago unexpectedly. And then my dad has had Parkinson's disease, which is really tough, right? It's chronic and it's degenerative for about 10 years now. And so, it's made me think a lot about mortality and life. And so, I've invested over close to about $100,000 a year, towards this. And so whether that's peptides, stem cells, quarterly blood work. We have a mobile phlebotomist come by the house every quarter, take blood work, and say it's really quick. You can see quarter over quarter, not just how you're sitting, but the trajectory, quarter over quarter of how things are looking. So that's been really, really fascinating, man.
I'm curious on the stem cell pieces. Is that something you've noticed a difference with stem cells? Is it pretty noticeable?
I have, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of this stuff. So we do, my wife and I have peptides pretty consistently, different routines based on our blood work. Peptides are fascinating, man. There's like 44,000 of them, and it's a much more natural homeopathic way of approaching health versus like synthetic, and medications and whatnot. So, and what I've noticed, it's really hard to quantify that though, right? Is it actually making a difference?
Working.
But there's something called, and I'll go quick here, but it's called a true age test. So they take your DNA and they measure the telomeres, the length of your telomeres. And so at the time, I'm 44 now. When I first did that 2 years ago, it came back. It shocked me. It came back that my biological age is at 53, right? So like 10, 11 years over at the time, which was really surprising because I always feel like I always say age is an attitude, and it's more about how you just kind of show up. And I feel like I have like younger energy, right? And so I was surprised by that. Started doing peptides, stem cells, those different things. And fast forward 2 years, we did another test and came back at 49. So, it's 3 years less plus 2 years later. So that's like a 5-year improvement. Now, I don't know exactly how accurate that really is, but that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
If that's the case. But
yeah, I use Function Health. I don't know if you ever use Function. Same concept. It's you pay, for anyone listening, actually DM me. I have a code to get it to you, but it's, you get 2 blood draws a year. It's $500 a year. You get 2 blood draws a year. You go in, they take a couple vials, and then you get it on your app, and they just tell you where all your numbers are, and then it gives you a biological age on there too.
Wow.
And it's really incredible.
It sounds a lot more economical.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You should put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Function Health, incredible. I've got acquaintances that have started that company, and it's just getting that biweekly, or the bi-yearly blood draw, right? Just to see where your levels are at. And just after my first draw note, I saw I was way out of balance on a lot of things, and just making a couple of diet adjustments and whatnot and sleep adjustments. It's been insane, the energy levels.
Love that, man. Yeah, and I think the peptides, stem cells, all that kind of stuff, it's kind of the cherry on top. Like, you've got to be doing the fundamentals, right?
Did you use stem cells in here, or did you have to go to Mexico?
Actually, I have a good friend here locally that actually has a lab that can create them. I've done it a few different places, but it's always been domestic here in the United States.
Right. Yeah.
Utah, by the way, is the first state in the country that passed legislation about 6 months ago, where they've opened up a lot of it, where it's a lot more, it's not so much a gray area or a fringe. And so you can actually go and get all those treatments here in Utah now. So, but hey, so what I was saying is that's really a cherry on top of the right. It's sleep, it's your workout, strength training, it's your diet, those kind of things. So I wouldn't even recommend messing around with those things unless you're willing to take care of like the cornerstone, some of those keystone habits.
Yeah. And I call it the energy triangle. I think the energy triangle is the foundational pieces of health, and it's diet, sleep, diet, sleep, and movement.
Yeah, my goal is to live to 120 years. But
120.
Yep. But more importantly, I want to be, up snowboarding and hanging out with my kids when they're 80 years old, my grandkids, and really having vitality and quality of life up until 100 years. So that's what I'm manifesting out on the universe. I'm working on that, but I do think that, it's also, looking more short term right now. I do feel like when you are in good shape and, it just helps you to operate at a higher energy, higher vibration, and you show up in a different space, right? And whether that's in a business meeting, whether that's as a dad, as a father, I think it's so important, man. I think a lot of people are neglecting that, and it's really detrimental to their overall success and fulfillment and happiness in life.
Yeah, and I want to stay there for a little bit too, because I think it's what you're saying. It sounds like so like obvious. Okay, yeah, we've heard this a million times, but the reality is, it's like when you are well rested, you're eating clean, and you're moving your body, you naturally feel more open. You feel more clear. You feel more optimistic. You feel more enthusiastic. You feel more engaged. You feel more present. And if you navigate your life from that state of being, naturally, everything is going to be enhanced,
100%.
right?
And what's really beautiful as a dad is I've got these 4 kids, and now that they see their parents acting that, living their life that way. So they have a very active lifestyle. Every Saturday morning we do a family workout. Everybody's down there. My kids, even my 10-year-old, they cold plunge, sauna and cold plunge in the morning with us. You talk about a proud dad moment. You see your little 10-year-old girl that's in there just shivering in the cold plunge, getting after it. And so last year we had a push-up competition in the summertime. The winner got $1,000 towards their real estate investments. And it went for 2.5 months. If you miss one single day, then you're out, eliminated. And the entire family of 6 made it for 2.5 months till the first elimination. So anyway, fun stuff.
The fit fam. Just the fit fam over here.
So that's section number 2, going back to lifestyle design, is health. And then we jump into time, which is our most precious resource. And so just being very intentional with that. I've been on a mission the last, year or two to really buy back your time. Became friends with Dan Martell. His book is called Buy Back Your Time. So I've got 25 things that I've done in the last 2 years, and I could even go through the list with you if that was valuable, of what I've done to be able to delegate and basically offload, responsibilities and tasks in my life, so I can be focusing on my highest and best use of my time. And so that's been a really fun, very effective process.
Which ones moved the needle the most there, would you say, had the biggest impact?
I'd say the biggest one would be hiring an incredible executive assistant. Like I've had a few of them, but like an incredible one that I can truly, a best in class one. And number 2 would be AI, just like really leaning into that for literally so many different aspects.
I'm curious, how do you use AI in your business, right? I haven't really found someone where it's like, oh, it's actually been a big needle mover.
That could be a whole podcast as well.
You over here.
Yeah, still a work in progress on that one of it, but it's really finding each department, where's the minutia, where's the tedious, time-consuming tasks that take up a lot of their bandwidth throughout the day. And the real focus is actually on output. As CEO, what I'm focusing on is output per employee. We have a relatively small team at Axia Partners. And so how can I create more output and also more efficiency and really optimize the processes within the company? And we're actually looking to hire and bring in an outside third-party AI integrator to help us with this process, because the hard thing is when you tell your team, hey, we want to lean into AI, it's such a vast, big concept that it can be challenging to actually integrate and implement. And so I've tried to lead by example with that, but honestly, I still feel like a rookie, man. There's just so much out there, but it's such a powerful tool, and
it's changing so fast too.
100%. And if you're in business and you're not leaning into AI, you are getting left behind. It is what it is. And so I'm really excited about that. But teaching my kids to use it. I mean, I a whole bunch of stories there. It's kind of a tangent, but AI is the future. But it's not about replacing people and stuff. It's just it's a tool that you can leverage to be able to get a lot more done in a much quicker time frame, right?
Yeah, and I remember seeing something on Twitter, some prediction, but there was some prediction saying that because of AI, we'll have the first solo person company that's worth $1 billion.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Like, can you imagine?
It's incredible, man.
Company of one worth $1 billion, right? Like,
yeah. But in our process, I mean, real high level with real estate. So AI can help us scrape data to find off-market deals. It can help us in the due diligence and the vetting process to be able to identify, if a deal fits our buy box, it's something that we actually want to dive into with my underwriting team. It can help us with helping to source the best type of debt on the property. We're trying to incorporate into our property management services as well, where it'll look over, tenant applications and do more of a background check, even a better background check than what would be done when you just pay, $35, have it done through a different firm. Anyway, there's so much to it. It's really interesting. And then also what we really want to do is create, actually I probably can't talk about that right now, but we're working on some other tools that are more proprietary that will streamline the entire process from acquisitions, capital raising, property management, asset management, dispositions, including investor relations, as well as distributions, the waterfall calculations, all of it.
It was insane. So my biggest breakthrough on AI was I input a ton of my personal data. So I uploaded like my book, I uploaded some speaking gigs I did, I uploaded like 5 coaching calls I've done, a bunch of podcasts I've hosted, a bunch of podcasts I've been on. And because I had a workshop, but this private equity firm hired me for a 2-day workshop on sales and communication and leadership. And then I put all of the data from this PE firm in there as well. And I said, here's their website, here's their mission, here's their branding, right? Here's current some of their portfolio companies. Here's all of my information. I have to do a 2-day training, create a training for me based upon my unique messaging. And it just like ripped out this whole workbook, this whole thing. I'm like, holy shit, this is going to change.
One more fun story kind of along those same lines is I have my own 12 investment criteria. I get probably half a dozen deals sent to me per day of people per day. It's a lot. And so I created my own investment committee. And so it's 12 people, including I got Elon Musk on there, Warren Buffett, just kind of plugged in these different individuals. And so now I can take a deal, say you send me a deal like, hey, come invest in this RV park with me, right? I'll literally just take that deck or the PPM, put it into my investment committee, and it will kick out an individual response from each one of those 12 investment committee members as to what their take on the opportunity, right? But I also put it in my, I have a very detailed asset allocation of how I like to invest my capital, my personal investment criteria, which is very rigid, and my own personal mission statement, our family foundation, what we're trying to build with the Allred Foundation, all these data points. But dude, it's incredible, man. I'm really excited about the future.
That'll save you so much time and effort. Like it's crazy. You just pump it right through there. What would these guys do? And does this match up with my current values and my standards?
Yep.
And it's like, yes or no.
You got it. Okay, so going back to lifestyle design. So mission statement, we got health, time, business, finance, spiritual, experiences, and relationships, right? And so basically I've written down in writing what I would define as a life well lived with no regrets and with purpose in each one of those 10 areas. And when I first sat down, for that on that Sunday for 4 days, for 4 hours, it was, it was a very rough draft of all that. So this is definitely a living document. I try to go back into it once a month. If I listen to a podcast or book or go to have some proximity with somebody I really respect and there's something that lands with me, I'll go back and I'll update that lifestyle design and incorporate that into it. But it's been a really, beautiful kind of a North Star for me. And what it's done, and also this last summer I had all my kids, so I also created a youth lifestyle design. It's on my website. So all my kids have gone through that same practice and written down what they want in their lives and how they see their potential and how they want to live out their lives. And so as a dad, again, that's pretty awesome, man. Like 13-year-old and, these little kids, and it's going to evolve a lot as well. But Doug, going back to intentionality, I mean, for me, man, that's been, I would say, the second most important thing in my life in terms of, achievement or fulfillment has been having that clarity in that direction on exactly what I want to do. Because, I say this very humbly, but about a month ago, I was speaking with somebody and they asked me a question. They said, hey, have you ever, decided to do something and been committed to it and not completed it? And I stepped back. I'm like, let me think on that for a minute. And like 3 minutes later, I'm like, no, I've never not achieved the mission. It was important to me. And they're like, whoa, that's crazy. I've never heard that before, right? But I think that the important point there is that like we all have the ability to summit whatever mountains that we want to. The important thing is making sure it's the right mountain, right? And so often people are just grinding, they're hustling, and they're sacrificing it and exerting all this energy But it's not the right purpose. It's not the right actual, and they hit the achievement, and there's no real fulfillment because it was never really in alignment with their purpose, what they really wanted, what they should have been working towards.
Yeah, and I mean, what you're talking about just nails a point that I talk a lot about in my coaching clients, is that I always say, hey, listen, majority of the time, people are not lacking motivation. They think they are. They think they lack motivation. Oh, I don't feel motivated. I don't feel inspired, right? How do I get pumped up to go complete this task or go knock doors, right? I need more energy. And I'm like, you're not lacking motivation. What you're lacking is crystal clear clarity. When you have crystal clear clarity of what you want to do and where you want to go and the direction you want to start moving in, the motivation comes naturally, right? And so there's this big misconception. People are always like, I need to go get pumped up and listen to Tony Robbins or Eric Thomas and pump up my chest so I can go push through the day. But it's like, if you actually just create a vision, do what you did, take 4 hours out of your day, get really clear on what you want to build, how you want to do it, where you want to go, the motivation comes really, really natural to you. And I'm sure since that first time you've done that activity, your design's probably changed quite a bit.
Quite a bit, for sure. But I agree with that because, when you have that clarity, there's joy in the journey, because even though it might be hard, there's purpose behind it, right? There's a reason for it. And, if I could elaborate on that a little bit, I said there's 3 things that really had the biggest impact. Number 2 was lifestyle design. I say number 1 is who I married, right? Having like the most incredible, life partner that's in my corner cheerleading for me and really holding down the home front so I can go out in the business world and really go out and, give it everything.
I mean, that's got to be the most important decision you make in your whole life, right?
100%. No question about it.
Yeah.
But number 3, the biggest impact for me in my life has been one of my core, I'd say the core motivator for Dave Allred is freedom. Like from a long time ago, I get fired up about the idea of, financial freedom, time freedom, lifestyle freedom, and really living life in the driver's seat, right? Where I get to take it where I want to go. And it just hits different, man, when you're doing something because you made that choice to be doing it. And so for me, that third thing was, I call it my financial freedom equation. It's also on my website, but it's really simple. It's saying, hey, how much passive income do I need, per year to cover my entire cost of living? And then you just go through this little equation, how much do I have right now? What's the gap? Quick example. Say for me, it was $200,000 of passive income per year. And the next line item on a spreadsheet is, what's my current passive income? Let's say you're at $50,000. You got some at fourplex, whatever. Next line item is, what's the gap? $150,000. Next line item is, how many years am I willing to commit to achieving true financial freedom? And for me, it was 10 years. So I was 30 years old at the time. And so I gave myself 10 years to go and create this. And the next line item is, well, how much new passive income per year do I need to achieve true financial freedom? In that situation, it's $15,000 per year, right? So very digestible when you kind of break it down that way. And as a real estate guy, I'm okay. That means I need to have 40 rental properties by age 40 to achieve true financial freedom. So my mantra became 40 by 40, right? 40 doors by age 40, and just hyper focus, man. Every Sunday I'd sit down, I'd measure that, and having it in writing, there's real power in that, and being able to look back at that, not just from the accountability standpoint, but the incremental improvements you're making along the way. And so hit that goal when I was 36, and that's when I retired from summer sales, went full time into real estate. Reset that goal to 1,000 doors by age 40, hit that when I was 40. And that's when I launched Axia Partners. But I think the point there is just intentionality, right? Like, here's my main point on that was, what really worked for me in that process was not just, okay, I want a few more zeros in my bank account. That really doesn't motivate, at least for me, very, very much. It was, okay, so if I get, this number, I get this freedom, what's that going to create in my life? And the more you can actually visualize that, like envisioning them and have, my 3 daughters, I'd be able to pay for a beautiful wedding and their honeymoon, and to be able to go again snowboarding with my entire posterity, right, at that time. But really like envisioning your mind, there's something special about that process because it gives you the energy, there's purpose, right? Again, money's not real, money's a tool, right? It's just something to help. It's a tool, really simply put. And so for me, it's been really getting very granular and very almost visual about what that lifestyle would look like if I'm able to achieve my short-term goals.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. And one thing I want to touch on, because obviously, again, going back to the very beginning of the podcast, like you did what door-to-door sales was about, right? Like creating some capital, getting intentionality, learning skill sets, now applying them on a bigger scale. And talk to us a little bit about Axia, because there's people who are going to listen to this podcast. By the time this comes out, summer's going to be on the tail end. There's going to be people who are listening to this who've going to made the most money they've ever made in their life. And everyone wants to invest and get into real estate. And you've provided a platform where, you can provide that opportunity. So tell us about Axia. What deals do you guys focus on? How can people get involved? Right? What are some of the recent deals you've done? What do those look like?
Yeah. So, I retired from door sales. I started doing syndications. Means you raise capital, for big multifamily deals all across the country. Did a lot of those. Had a few hundred investors. Actually, almost all door sales guys, right? Just people that I used to create value for them as a leader, and now it's more breaking down the barrier of entry and allowing them to come into these real estate deals, get the tax benefits, passive income, financial freedom, but also the education side of it. And so, one thing that I've coined for our investment firm, Axia Partners, is this idea of experiential investing. And so what that means is, primary goal is ROI, return on investment, but secondarily to that is an ROE, a return on experience.
Love that.
And so I'm just big on experiences, man, in my life. And so, when I went into real estate full time, I quickly realized that, you're looking at spreadsheets, you're looking at deals all day long, and I really miss the human aspect of it. And so they're like, how can I incorporate more of that human, that interpersonal side of the business into, boring real estate? And so I came up with experiential investing. So what that means is we pull back the curtain, full transparency on exactly how we do what we do. Because a lot of investors want to be doing these bigger commercial deals, right? But they lack the confidence or the competence to be doing it on their own. So a unique value proposition that we're committed to is actually show our investors how we do what we do. So for example, every time we close on a deal, we do a full 1 hour webinar. We show you how we found the deal, the full underwriting model, how we source the debt, the business plan, all of it. And so that's been received really well. A lot of guys really appreciate, that approach. But, what inspired me? So I was very proud to be able to say that I've never lost $1 of investor capital in any real estate deal I've ever done. And I was able to say that, as a syndicator, but, the fund model mitigates a lot of downside risk because instead of investing in just one address or one property, it's a whole portfolio of assets. And so, I started investing in other funds, and I fell in love with the fund model. And so I wanted to do that at scale, because with a syndication, you can usually bring in maybe 10 to 25 partners. In a fund, I can bring in 1,000 investors per fund, right? As an example. And so I decided to launch Axia Partners. And even today, Doug, humble brag, but never lost all our investor capital, right? Over, I think, 17 years in the real estate space. We've never had to pause distributions. We've never had to do any capital calls. So I'm really proud of that. We've got an amazing, best in class team over here. And, I'd say we have about 450 investors right now. And a lot of them, in fact, probably the majority of them are from the door sales space, right? Executives, high earners, accredited investors throughout the space. And so it's been really fun to be able to create value at scale for that community, right? Even though I'm not necessarily in that community for 8 years now, which is crazy. It's been 8 years, but I think a lot of those guys really need that, man. They need to be able to figure out ways to help mitigate their taxes, how to be able to create passive income. At least for me, when I was knocking doors, it was always a means to an end, right? And so, and for me, that means to an end was reoccurring passive income. It's that mailbox money. And so that's really a lot of those same motivators have been kind of parlayed into Axia Partners, where, we create really strong tax advantages. We create strong cash flow, appreciating assets. It's not crypto or, some swing for the fences, home run where you're going to
Barcoin.
yeah, there you go. Get rich quick. But, to me, real estate's really been, it's hitting solid doubles and triples. And that's how, with time, you really create true wealth. I think your audience is probably relatively, younger demographic. And I would just, the beautiful thing there is they have time on their side. And so be patient in the process. And if you can get a solid return, Warren Buffett says it best. There's 2 rules in investing. Rule number 1, don't lose your money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1, right? And when you lose, especially if you're inexperienced, a little bit younger, like that's pretty detrimental, especially if you're knocking doors to make that money. Like that's a tough way to go. And so it's been really fun for me to be able to create value at scale. We've done a lot of different investments, but we primarily focus on recession resilient commercial real estate. So that's going to be multifamily. I love multifamily. It's always been kind of my bread and butter. Very recession resilient. Nothing creates more consistent cash flow than
Is there a
multifamily.
sweet spot on number of doors on those you like to look
Yeah, anywhere between 80 to 225 is our sweet spot. Primarily in tertiary markets, which means smaller markets, and that's because a lot of the big money, the BlackRock, Blackstones, are you got to go to the big MSA, our bigger markets, and so tertiary markets a little bit smaller unit count, and then generally it's going to be what's called a Class B. So the Class A, Class A, Class B, Class C, Class D, right? And what that means is it's vintage and amenities and whatnot. So Class A is the brand new, really, really nice stuff, really high price points. We like to find more of a Class B, B minus, but it's in a nice neighborhood, so we can go in there and do a lot of strategic value add improvements to property, increase the quality of life, therefore increasing the NOI or net operating income, and that's how we really can create such strong returns for our investors. Speaking of returns, we're targeting about a 2 to 2.5 return for our partners over about a 4 to 5 year hold period, and cash flow distributions on a quarterly basis. But I think what's unique about this opportunity for specifically for door-to-door sales guys is it's the learning opportunity of it as well, and it's mitigating. We call it asymmetrical risk return. So it's really focused on how do you mitigate downside risk of loss while still creating a strong upside opportunity. And so, yeah, that's what we're working on right now. We just launched a $100 million fund, $100 million equity raise. And what we're really excited about looking forward is 2 asset classes. So it's multifamily, and that's also destination RV parks. And
destination RV parks.
RV parks, yep. And so I'll take 30 seconds on that one. But RV parks actually have the highest cash flow right now across any asset class in commercial real estate.
Really?
Yep. Our average cap rate going in is between 8 to 11%. So we're in a positive leverage scenario right out the gate. So we're able to start cash flow distributions immediately upon acquisition. And then also, and this might be a little bit over, I'll try to keep it really simple, but there's institutional money that's come into that. So 10 years ago, self-storage and mobile home parks were very fragmented. I mean, the mom and pop operators wasn't any like property technology, third-party management companies. But in the last 10 years, so much money's flown in from the big institutions, the big boys, that now it's really hard to find great deals in that space. We feel like RV parks are on the cutting edge of being that exact same situation where there's not a lot of institutional money coming into it, but they're starting to pay attention to it. We're starting to see more centralization, more prop tech coming into the space as well. And so we want to be on that front end of that and really capitalize on those opportunities. We just went under contract on a few RV parks. We have a portfolio of 15 RV parks right now. We're looking at about a $70 million acquisition price. And so we're very, very bullish on that. And part of that is because we polled our investors earlier this year and we asked, hey, what do you guys want to see in your investments this year? And the number one thing was cash flow, like a quick path to cash flow. And then secondly was, a really good equity multiplier, 2 to 3 times your money within over, 4 to 5 year period. So we reverse engineered our investment thesis based on the feedback of what our investors are really
and the
for.
intentionality,
There you go.
Very, very, very intentional on what you want to provide back for your investors. So let me ask you this. So let's say someone's listening to this. Hey, I've got, a kind of a chunk of change. I want to get in the investment game. How do they get in touch with you? What's the next step? How do they drop in, be part of Axia?
Our website is axiapartners.com, AXIA. Also on social media, any platform, Dave Allred. Feel free to reach out as well. But yeah, just reach out. Should be pretty easy to get a hold of us. This fund, we just opened it up and really excited to, with $100 million of equity, you can go out and acquire about 200 to 250 million. It's about $250 million of commercial real estate. And yeah, man, I mean, I'm very passionate about it. For me, that's been door-to-door sales was the vehicle to be able to create, to create the cash and to be able to create revenue. And real estate's been the vehicle to be able to really create true freedom and to mitigate taxes. Like that's a whole other podcast right there. But, one thing I won't even go with that. That's a tangent. That's probably take too much time there.
Taxes thing. Yeah. Yeah, man. Hey, I really appreciate you coming out, man. It's like, it's really inspiring. One thing I love about Axia so much, and the partners you have, is not only you guys providing great deals and great returns, but to your point, you're saying is you're teaching people the education behind it. And I think that is just as valuable as the return, because once you have the information and you understand the deal flow, now you're able to take that out into the real world.
Yeah, and by the way, on that note, whether it's with Axie or just on your own fruition, but I always believe that your financial IQ has got to stay ahead of your earning ability, right? Otherwise, just call it gravity, call it whatever, like it just you lose it. Like it doesn't stay with you. So I just challenge, everybody with the most amazing times where everything's literally available at the tip of our fingertips. And so, work on your financial literacy. Again, like for me, we never talked about that stuff growing up at all. But just because, that's not a good excuse looking forward, because we're all in control. We have ownership over our future, right? And our destiny. And so, just really try to work on increasing your own personal financial capacity, your IQ, your own personal investment portfolio, like what's really important to you, your own investment thesis. And the more clarity you can get around that, it's going to really help guide you in your investment decisions. And I love the expression that says, the higher the emotion, the lower the intelligence. So you really want to take the emotion out of it and base it more on intentionality.
Yep. Keep your learning ahead of your earning.
Hey, there you go.
There it is.
Nailed it.
Cool. Dave, thanks for being on, man. I appreciate you. I admire you, man. I'm excited for the future. And I know that there's still plenty of incredible things you're going to create in the world, man. And I'm honored to be able to watch it.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.